Hi, I'm Lark Orvick-Moore. Today we are going to read Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemmingway. Hemingway did so much study for this book by being an ambulance driver in Italy. All of his books were written by his own experience, but he really changed American writing as we know it. He was pretty particular. Did you know that he wrote the ending 39 times until he got the ending just the way he wanted it? Hope you enjoy. Ernest Hemmingway was born in Oak Park, Illinois in 1899. He served as an ambulance driver in the Red Cross during World War I and was severely wounded in Italy. He moved to Paris in 1921 to devote himself to writing, and he lived among the expatriate community that included Gertrude Stein, F. Scott Fitzgerald, and Ezra Pound. He was defined by economy of language and understatement. Hemingway's terse prose revolutionized American writing. He was awarded the Nobel Prize for Literature in 1954, and his classic novel, The Old Man and the Sea, won a Pulitzer in 1953. He was known for his larger-than-life personality and a passion for bullfighting, fishing, and big game hunting. He died in Ketchikan, Idaho, on July 2nd, 1961. Today's cutting will be the last 8 pages from his book, Farewell to Arms. It is a famous cutting. It's a cesarean, one said. They're going to do a cesarean. The other one laughed. We're just in time. Aren't we lucky? They went in the door and led to the gallery. Another nurse came along, and she was hurrying too. You go right in there, go right in, she said. I'm staying outside. She hurried in, and I walked up and down the hall. I was afraid to go in. I looked out the window, and it was dark, but the light from the window, I could see that it was raining. And I went into the room at the far end of the hall and looked at the labels on the bottles in the glass case. Then I came out, and I stood in an empty hall and watched the door of the operating room. A doctor came out and followed by a nurse. He held something in his 2 hands that looked like a freshly skinned rabbit and hurried across the corridor with it and in through another door. I went down to the door, and he had gone in and found them in the room doing things to a newborn child. The doctor held him up for me to see, and he held him by his heels and slapped him. Is he all right? He's magnificent. He weighs 5 kilos. I had no feeling for him. He did not seem to have anything to do with me. I felt no feeling of fatherhood. Aren't you proud of your son? The nurse said. They are washing him and wrapping him in something, and I saw a little dark face and a dark hand, but I did not see him move nor hear him cry. The doctor was doing something to him again, and he looked upset. No, I said, he nearly killed his mother. It isn't the little darling's fault. Didn't you want a boy? No, I said. The doctor was busy with him, and he held him up by his feet and slapped him, and I did not wait to see. I went out into the hall, and I could go in now and see, and I went to the door a little way down the gallery. The nurses who were sitting in the rail motioned to me to come on down where they were, and I shook my head. I could see enough right where I was. I thought Catherine was dead. She looked dead. Her face was gray. The part of that I could see. Down below, under the tight light, the doctors were sewing a great long forceps spread, thick-edged wound. Another doctor in a mask gave the anesthetic. 2 nurses with masks handed things. It looks like a drawing of the Inquisition. I knew as I watched, I could have watched it all, but I was glad I hadn't. I do not think that I could have watched them cut, but I was watched as the wound was closed into a high welted ridge with quick, skillful-look stitches, like a cobbler's, and I was glad. When the wound was closed, I went out into the hall and walked up and down again, and after a while the doctor came out. How is she? She's all right. Did you watch? He looked tired. I saw you sew her up. The incision looked very long. You thought so? Yes. Will that scar flatten out? Oh, yes. After a while, they brought out the wheeled stretcher and took her very rapidly down the hallway to the elevator. I went along beside it. Catherine was moaning. Downstairs, they put her in a bed in her room, and I sat in a chair at the foot of the bed. There was a nurse in the room, and I got up and stood by the bed. It was dark in the room, and Catherine put out her hand. "Hello, darling," she said. Her voice was very weak and tired. "Hello, you sweet. What sort of baby is it?" "Shh, don't talk," said the nurse. "A boy. He's long and wide and dark. Is he all right?" "Yes," I said, "he's fine." I saw the nurse look at me strangely. "I'm awfully tired," Catherine said, "and I hurt like hell. Are you all right, darling?" "I'm fine. Don't talk." "You were lovely to me. Oh, darling, I hurt dreadfully. What does he look like?" "He looks like a little skinned rabbit with a puckered up old man's face." "You must go out," the nurse said. "Madam Henry must have not talk." "I'll be outside." "Go and get something to eat." "No, I'll be outside." And I kissed Catherine. She was very gray and weak and tired. "May I speak to you?" I said to the nurse, and she came out into the hall with me. I walked a little way down the hall. "And what's the matter with the baby?" I asked. "Didn't you know?" "No." "He wasn't alive. He was dead?" "They couldn't start him breathing again. The cord was caught around his neck or something." "So he's dead?" "Yes. It's such a shame. He was such a fine big boy. I thought you knew." "No," I said. "You better go back in with Madam." I sat down in a chair in front of the table where there were nurses reporting, and they hung on clips and on the side and looked out the window. I could see nothing but the dark and the rain falling across the light of the windows. So that was it. The baby was dead. That was why the doctor looked so tired. But why had they acted that way that they did in the room with him? They supposed he could come around and start breathing, probably. I had no religion, but I knew he ought to have been baptized. But what if he never breathed at all? And he hadn't. He had never been alive, except in Catherine. I'd felt him kick there often enough, but I hadn't for a week or so. Maybe he had choked all that time, poor little kid. I wasn't the... Wish to hell I hadn't been choked up like that. Oh, no. Still, there would not be all this dying to go through. Now Catherine would die. That was what you did. You died. You did not know what it was all about. You never had time to learn. They threw you in and told you the rules, and the first time you got caught off guard, they killed you. They killed you graciously like Imo, or they killed you with syphilis like Rinaldi, but they killed you in the end. You could count on that. Stay around and they would kill you. Once in a camp, I had put a log on a fire, and it was full of ants. And as I commenced to burn, the ants swarmed out and went first toward the center, and then the fire. And then they turned back and ran toward the end. And when there were enough on the end, they fell into the fire. Some got out, their bodies burnt and flattened, and went off not knowing where they were going. But most of them went toward the fire and then back toward the end and swarmed on the cool end and finally fell off into the fire. I remember thinking at the time that it was the end of the world and a splendid chance for me to be in a Messiah and lift the log off the fire and throw it out of the way, and the ants could get off onto the ground. But I did not do anything but throw a cup of water on the log so that I would have the cup empty for whiskey when I added the water to it. I think the cup of water on the burning log only steamed the ants. So now I sat in the hall and waited to hear how Catherine was. The nurse did not come out, so after a while I went to the door and I opened it very softly and looked in. I could not see at first because there was a bright light in the hall and it was dark in the room. And then I saw the nurse sitting by the bed and Catherine's head on the pillow, and she was all flat under the sheet. The nurse put her finger to her lips, then stood up and came to the door. "How is she?" I asked. "She's all right," said the nurse. "You should go and have your supper and then come back if you wish." I went down the hall and then down the stairs and down the door to the hospital and down to the dark street and the rain of the cafe. It was brightly lit inside, and there were so many people at the tables. I did not see a place to sit, but the waiter came up to me and took me my wet coat and hat and showed me to a place at a table across from an elderly man who was drinking a beer and reading the evening paper. And I sat down and I asked the waiter what the pot de jour was. "Veal stew, but it's finished." "What can I eat?" "Ham and eggs, egg and cheese, charcuterie." "I had the charcuterie for noon," I said. "That's true," he said. "That's true. You ate charcuterie this noon." He was a middle-aged man with a bald top of his head and a hair slicked over it. He had a kind face. "What do you want, ham and eggs or eggs and cheese?" "Ham and eggs," I said, "and a beer, a demi-blonde." "Yes," I said. "I remembered," he said. "You took a demi-blonde this noon." I ate the ham and eggs and drank the beer. The ham and eggs were in a round dish, and the ham was underneath and the eggs on top, and it was very hot, and at the first mouthful I had to take a drink of beer to cool my mouth. I was hungry, and I asked the waiter for another order. I drank several glasses of beer. I was not thinking at all, but read the paper of the man opposite me. It was about a breakthrough in the British front. When he realized I was reading the back of his paper, he folded it over, and I thought of asking the waiter for my own paper, but I could not concentrate. It was hot in the cafe, and the air was bad. Many of the people at the tables knew one another. There were several card games going on. The waiters were busy bringing drinks from the bar to the table. 2 men came in and could not find a place to sit. They stood opposite the table where I was, and I ordered another beer. I was not ready to leave yet, and it was too soon to go back to the hospital. I tried not to think, and to be perfectly calm. The man stood around, but there was nothing, no table opening, so they left. I drank another beer, and there was quite a pile of saucers now in front of me. The man opposite me had taken off his spectacles, put them away in a case, and folded the paper and put it in his pocket, and now sat holding a liquor glass and looking out the room. Suddenly I knew I had to get back. I called the waiter and paid the reckoning and got into my coat, put on my hat, and started out the door. I walked through the rain to the hospital. Upstairs I met the nurse coming down the hall. "I just called you at the hotel. Something dropped inside of me." "What's wrong?" "Mrs. Henry has had a hemorrhage." "Can I go in?" "No, not yet. The doctor is with her." "Is it dangerous?" "Is it dangerous?" The nurse went into the room and shut the door. I sat outside in the hall. Everything was gone inside of me. I did not think. I couldn't think. I knew she was going to die, and I prayed that she would not. Don't let her die. Oh, God, please don't let her die. I'll do anything for you if you don't let her die. Please, 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 dear God. Don't let her die. Dear God, don't let her die. Please, please, please don't let her die. God, please make this not death. I'll do anything. I'll do anything. You took the baby. Don't take her, too. It's all right, but don't let her die. Oh, please, please, God, don't let her die. The nurse opened the door and motioned with a finger for me to come. I followed her into the room. Catherine did not look up when I came in. I went over to the side of the bed, and the doctor was standing by the end and the opposite side. Catherine looked at me and smiled. I bent down over the bed, and I started to cry. Poor darling. Catherine said, she looked so gray. You're all right, Cat, I said. You're going to be all right. I'm going to die. And I hate it, she said, and I took her hand. Don't touch me, she said. I let go of her hand, and then she smiled. Poor darling, you touch me all you want. You'll be all right, Cat. I know you'll be all right. I meant to write a letter. to have if anything happened, but I didn't get it done. Do you want me to get a priest or anything? Is there anything I can do for you? No, just you. Then a little later, I'm not afraid. I just hate it. You must not talk like that, the doctor said. All right, Catherine said. Do you want me to do anything, Cat? Can I get you anything? Catherine smiled. No. Then a little later, you won't do those things with another girl and say those same things, will you? Never. I want you to have girls, though. I don't want them. You're talking too much, the doctor said. Mr. Henry must go out. And he came back later. He can come back later, and you are not going to die. You must not be silly. All right. I'll come and stay with you at night. It's very hard for her to talk. Please go out of the room, the doctor said. You cannot talk. Catherine winked at me, and her face was gray. I'll be right outside, I said. Don't worry, darling, Catherine said. I'm not a bit afraid. It's just a dirty trick. You dear, brave, brave girl. I waited outside in the hall, and I waited a long time. The nurse came, and the door came over to me. I'm very sorry, Mr. Henry. Mrs. Henry is very ill, and I'm afraid for her. Is she dead? No, but she's unconscious. It seems she had one hemorrhage after another. They couldn't stop it. I went into the room and stayed with Catherine until she died. She was unconscious all the time, and it did not take her very long to die. Outside the room, in the hall, I spoke to the doctor. Is there anything I can do tonight? No, there's nothing you can do. Can I take you to your hotel? No, thank you. I'm going to stay here for a while. I know there is nothing to say. I can't tell you. No, there's nothing to say. Good night, he said. I cannot take you to your hotel. No, thank you. It's only the one thing to do. The operation proved. I don't want to talk about it, I said. I would like to take you to your hotel. No, thank you. He went down the hall, and I went to the door of the room. You can't come in now, one of the nurses says. Yes, I can, I said. You can't come in yet. You get out, I said, and the other one too. But after I had got them out and shut the door and turned off the light, it wasn't any good. It was like saying goodbye to a statue. After a while, I went out and I left the hospital and I walked back to the hotel in the rain. Thank you for listening. This was Farewell to Arms by Ernest Hemmingway.